Have you ever wondered how to make your Christmas boxes look three-dimensional? Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today I'm sharing some simple tips for drawing these adorable gift boxes so they look 3D. We're going to start with some simple shapes that anyone can draw and then add dimension from there. To paint them, we'll start with watercolor, then take a blended approach of watercolor and watercolor pencil, and then finally do this group of three in watercolor pencil. I've included timestamps so you can go directly to the boxes that interest you. Let's go ahead and get started. So for today's project, I have quite a few small pieces of cheap watercolor paper. Something like Canson XL is perfect for this. These larger pieces would be good for maybe like a little mini card or a postcard, or you could adhere it to the front of a card. I have a whole video teaching how to turn small paintings into cards, so I can include a link to that. But anyways, I've got a variety of sizes of paper. You could absolutely do this in a sketchbook as well, but I'm gonna do this because you know what? If you do them on little pieces of paper like this and then you like them, you can turn them into small gifts or cards, right? So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna quickly draw a dot there where I'm gonna plan to punch my hole, and then I'm gonna draw what I would consider probably the absolute easiest way to draw a little gift. And that's just our basic box with ribbon and a bow. I'm doing nothing fancy for these loops. I'm just doing it really fast and almost sloppy, but I'm sure you're ready to take your presents to the next level. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if you want to take your box up a notch, I'm going to show you how to draw this in a really simple way. And this method that we're doing here is sort of a simple version of one-point perspective. We are going to start the same way we did before, just with our basic kind of rectangle, square box, whatever you want to call this. And you can definitely use a ruler if you need to for drawing this. There's no reason you have to freehand it. And then what we're going to do is draw a little diagonal line here. And we're going to do another one here so that they're both basically parallel to each other. It's okay if they are ever so slightly closer together at the back here. You don't want them coming further apart. So just keep that in mind. You want to just get those nice and parallel more or less. And then our vertical is going to be perfectly vertical. And that is something that's a good rule to just know whenever you're going to do anything in perspective, your verticals always are going to stay vertical. That's a common mistake beginners make when they try and draw a box, is these verticals tend to end up tipped. You never need to tip them unless you're actually drawing something like a barn that's falling apart, which is probably not what you're drawing most days. So your verticals, just always, always, always keep them parallel with the edges of your paper. And you're going to go ahead and do another parallel line, more or less parallel with these guys here. Again, you never want these lines to be getting further apart as they move away from you. You want them to either be a little closer together or just parallel. Then we're going to draw this back line just like so. And there we have a box in one-point perspective. All right, so what we'll do is just do our same ribbon concept across the front of the gift. And this time, instead of drawing one across here, I think I'm going to draw one down the side of the box, since we can see that side. And then across the top, we're going to do these lines for the bow, or for the ribbon rather, and they are going to be a running parallel again with these two lines here. And then the one that comes across here is going to be perfectly horizontal, kind of along the same horizontals that we have for the top of our box here. So we're just going to do something really simple like this. Then I'm going to just erase a little bit in the middle and draw a really super easy bow. So I'm going to just do some loops and then loop. If you want to draw the inside of the loop, you can, but you can just keep it simple and just do something like this. Or you can see I'm creating some of these with a little bit of an overlap. I'm not sure how much of this is going to end up showing through though when we add the paint. I want to paint this one quite simply. And so I think we should just draw these loops pretty simple too. All right, now things are getting fun because we're going to do what we call two-point perspective. And this is actually the way that we're going to draw the rest of our boxes today. Alrighty, so you know what, if you want to grab a ruler, if that helps at all, you can grab a ruler. Like I say, you can freehand it. If it's easier for you with a ruler, absolutely grab a ruler. There's no reason you have to freehand these lines. Actually, when I do teach perspective drawing, we use rulers because we do need them once you get into more details. So don't worry, using a ruler is completely acceptable. You just want to make sure these verticals are vertical, as I mentioned. Keep them vertical. You don't have to space these three out perfectly, but I'm going to do it in this case. Not necessary. We're going to do some different sizes and shapes here in a minute. So, all right. So this is my center line. This is where the box is going to be pointing closest to us, if that makes sense. Let's just start drawing and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to draw a upwards line here, and I'm going to do another one here. So these are going to be parallel with each other, okay? You want them the same. You don't want to have this line going wonky compared to this one. You want them the same. Then you're going to do the same thing over here. And you could change the angle, but hey, let's just keep the angles kind of almost like opposite of each other here. But I'll show you how you can tweak things here in a minute. Let's just keep this more or less like this. Okay, then we can get rid of the lines that are standing, you know, too tall. Let's just get rid of them because they'll just cause us confusion if they are still here. And then we're going to come in the back here and we're going to have a line again that's parallel to this one. So you want to keep things matching. These two lines are going to be the same. If they come a little bit like closer to each other this way, that's actually okay. You don't want them to come further apart. If we're doing perspective drawing, we're going to have these lines actually converge somewhere far in the distance, but that's a lesson for another day. So let's just keep this more or less simple and just make sure that this and this line are parallel, and then this and this line are going to be parallel more or less. So let's just do that. All right, now do we want to add ribbon again? Why don't we do it just because we've already done it to our other two? Now there is a little trick to lining this ribbon up perfectly in the center, but I think again we can eyeball it. Let's do that on this side too. And then we're going to do the crossover in the middle. And again, this line, the ribbon is going to be parallel with these two lines, the one that runs across this way. So you're going to do parallel, parallel to the best of your ability. And then you're going to do the same thing over here with this one, parallel and parallel to the best of your ability. Oops, I'm going a little crooked and wonky here. It's okay, just take a few more passes. As you can see, I always say I work very lightly and tentatively to start with anyways, because I want to have the freedom to easily erase. And once again, you can decide, do you want a bow or do you like the look of being able to see all of that on the top? You can just leave it like that if you prefer. I feel like I'm like a little bit, I feel like I'm slightly not parallel here, so I'm just going to bring in the bottom one. I feel like this could just come in a little tiny bit. And then I think I will draw a bow here. I don't know, the shape of this box feels like it needs a bow, so I'm just going to go ahead and just lightly lift the center of this a little bit. If you want to be more precise with your bows, you can kind of have something where the bow comes like this and then the other side wraps underneath like that. I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm saying. Like I say, this lesson isn't really about the bows, but you know, if you're like, you know what, I really want my bow to look just so, then that's where I would kind of let them overlap like that. Just going to throw another loop in here somewhere. Maybe another one here. Okay, this bow is getting a little bit overboard. Maybe too big. Just going to bring one of these loops down a little bit, or two of them, just to kind of fill this front space in a little bit. So I'm going to carry on doing a few more drawings of presents. However, I've included timestamps, so if you're ready to just jump right into the painting, you absolutely can. Why don't we have some fun and do one that's got a couple different boxes on here, maybe even 3 boxes, just to create a little bit of variety in one picture here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a tall one. Doesn't really matter if you start at the top or the bottom. Make sure my verticals are vertical here. I'll just clean these lines up quick. Then I'm going to draw a smaller box here with a longer side and a shorter side so that you can see how I would do that. Finally, I'll place one more box here in the back, and then we'll have the side of it show here. And then I'll top it with a bow. I demonstrated this style of bow in a recent video in more depth, and so I'll include a link for that in the description below. And with this one, why don't we just draw a bow right here? We'll just do a simple bow, like a few of these little loops. And then maybe with this one, we'll just do the ribbon that crosses over on the top. Why don't we draw, I don't know, it feels like it needs a little ball or something here, maybe like a Christmas ornament. I don't know, let's try it. Let's just draw a simple ball. I think I like that. Let's go ahead and start painting. For this little present, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to use some dark green or maybe even my medium green. And I'm going to just put some along this side here. So almost like L shapes in each of these little boxes. I want to work fairly quick because I'm going to be throwing some water in and dragging it around. So I'm just putting these L shapes in here really quickly. Grab my water and fill in the whole shape except for the L. You can see it's already starting to bleed wherever I touch, but just do something like that. And then I'm just going to come in and just encourage that L to kind of bleed out into my clear areas. So it's kind of a different way of dragging color from the darker areas into the lighter areas. And it's just a nice kind of watercolor look. If you work fast enough, it works really well. So I'm going to let that dry before I come in and do my ribbon. With this one, I'm going to use my deeper red. It's slightly on the burgundy side, and I'm going to use a firmer brush. I think it might allow me to have a little more brush control for these fine details. And then I'll use my softer brush just to drop a little bit of water in and kind of blend it around, because I realized, you know what, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of that watercolor look, and I lost it on the first one. I just pretty much painted it solid. So with this one, I've gone ahead and done the same technique that I did when I painted the gift, where I'm dropping in the dark color first, and then just adding some water to kind of blend it around a little bit. So let's do that up here too. I'm going to do some of the inside, more like the inside of these loops, and then I'll come in and use a little bit of clear water to kind of blend it. Now you could, if you're doing all these loops side by side, you'll want to leave little white spaces kind of between the loops in order to keep them from blending together, or else just do a few loops, let it dry, and then come back and do the rest so that you don't lose your definition or your shapes here. I'm going to come in with water and you'll see what I mean. Try and just blend it. I actually mushed that one together, so did exactly what I don't mean. Here you can see I've kind of left a little white space and separated them. Yeah, my shapes are blending together. I didn't leave enough white space, which is okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to fill it in a little bit like so. I have some white gaps, and then what I'm going to do is I'll come back in after and add a little bit more definition if I feel like I need it. I'm just going to drop a bit more darkness right here. Kind of more in the center of the bow. I should say the lower center of the bow. Now that this little present is dry, I can use some of my deeper red and define the shadows a little bit, and if I need to, I can even throw a little bit of my shadow color in. I'm just going to kind of put the darkness almost on the left and lower side of each of these little loops. Not doing anything too fancy, but I think that has fixed the problem. I'm going to start out with painting the sides of my box, similar to how I did before. My paint is feeling a little bit watery though. Might have to add some more in there. So I'll do that, and then I'll throw in my water quick before it gets dry, and then I'll come back in and maybe throw a little more pigment. It feels just a bit almost too watery right now. I'm just dropping a little bit of clear water in there just to kind of get things looking smooth. I think I'm okay with that. Now you could let the front of your box dry before you try and do the side, because when you do these two shapes side by side, they will bleed into each other a little bit. I'm going to just try it anyways and see how it works out. I can see I've got a little bit of blooming here, so I'm just going to drop a little bit more color in here, maybe before it blooms around too much. I don't mind a bit of blooming. That happens when you have a lot of water with cheaper paper, and I think I'm okay with that. I'm just going to go ahead, keep it simple, and just do the top of the box. But you can absolutely let each shape, or I should say each side of the box, dry before you do the other sides. All right, I'm going to let that part dry, and then I'll come and add the bow. All right, so this is almost dry, so I'm going to come in and do these loops. And like I say, I'm just going to keep it simple and just paint these a nice solid green color, and then we will add a little bit of shadow afterwards. While this is still wet, I'm dropping a little bit of like dark blue-green, kind of down at the lower parts of this ribbon, a little bit to the left side, and a little bit on the bow. I'm also noticing my shapes are just a little bit sloppy down here at the base. I've kind of lost my perspective a little bit. I'm gonna see if I can pull that back in with just extending my box down just a little bit. Now I'm gonna let this dry and I'm gonna come back in afterwards and just refine the details just a little smidge. Now I'm gonna come in with a few extra touches. These are totally optional, but I think it can add a little dimension to just add a little bit more shadow to the shadow side of our gift, and then to add a little bit of detail to our little bow. Maybe I shouldn't be adding a second layer here, but you can see I was able to kind of gently rub out some of those blue marks that I had going, and then I can just drop a tiny little bit more red. Like I say, this is totally optional, but I'm just gonna drop a tiny bit more of this red on this side of the gift, and that's gonna help make this side look like it's in the shadow compared to the other sides of the gift box. So maybe you could say nice, but not necessary. I might even use a little bit of red and just kind of define my line here on the side of the present, and just soften the edge ever so slightly. I don't want to do anything crazy here because I don't want to have a whole bunch of lifting happening. I'm throwing a little bit of blue and my shadow color into my green, and I'm just going to define my shadows just a tiny bit, again, more to the left lower side of this bow. Let me change brushes and get one that's a little firmer here. Yeah, I think that helped. I'm just going to throw a quick shadow onto here as well. Not perfect, but you know what? It's going to work. I'm going to do this present white. So I'm using this light blue-gray to represent shadow. I'm going to call the left side all the time our shadow with these boxes. It's just kind of my habit of making the light source be on our right. So the light's always more on this side of the painting. It's not necessary to do it that way. It's just my habit, and it keeps it consistent when you're just taking artistic license. You're not working from a reference photo. So I'm going to put a little bit of shadow down along the bottom edge of this, but for the most part, I want this to be kind of lighter on this side because I'm going to pretend the light's hitting it, and then I'm just going to throw a little bit of water up here and a little bit of shadow the same way I did before, and I'm going to call it good. And then I'll come back in a minute. With this one, I want to take a little bit of a blended approach. So we've already started this in watercolor, right? But I want to go ahead and do the bow and the ribbon with watercolor pencil, so you can see that you can blend. So you can kind of do like an underpainting, if you will, with your watercolor, and then you can come back in with your watercolor pencil and do details. So let's do that with this one. So I'm just going to go over this with my bright red, fill in the ribbon, and leave a slight highlight on the upper right side of the ribbon here. Might fill this one up with just a smidgen more. And then I'm going to come in and color the ribbon on the top. Actually, I might even come in and do the shadows before I finish doing that ribbon, just so you guys can see where I'm planning to put the shadows. It's easier to kind of follow without all the red on it. So I'm just gonna show you here quick where we want those shadows to be. So I'm using my red violet. I'm gonna come in and do the shadow part. So the parts that I'm planning to shade are the parts that almost look like they're kind of curling under here. This is optional if you wanna just do it kind of the same way we went and did our other little ribbons. You absolutely can. But I thought, why don't we add a little extra detail in here and get some of the underside of some of these. Then once I've got that red violet on, I can come on top of that. So I'm covering everything, including the red violet, with my brighter red. And you're gonna see that's gonna just kind of blend the two, the purple and the red will kind of blend together to create a nice shadow color. Certainly don't have to use a red violet though. You could use anything that's sort of like a deep red or a burgundy. I'm going to come and put a little bit of that shadow color on my ribbon down here as well. So put a little bit extra at the bottom where it's going to have more shadow. And we definitely need to get these drawn in here too. And remember, these are parallel. They run parallel with the edges of this box. So just keep that in mind as you do this. I don't think the other one is actually visible back there, so we'll just do these two front ones. Maybe put a little bit of shadow underneath this one since the bow would be casting a shadow on it. Could even do a little bit right under here. I might even add a little bit more of a loop here to kind of make it look like this bow is a little bit more 3D. There we go. And then I'm going to come and blend that. So with my watercolor pencil, as usual, I have my paper towel nice and handy and my wet brush. And I'm just going to dab my brush off so it's not sopping wet. I'm going to come in and fill this area, not the highlight yet. And then I'll come back in and first I'll just do these two red sections and I'll come in and grab my shadows. I always start with my lightest and then I work my way into the shadows, because if you blend your shadows into your lights a little bit too much or too soon, you can end up losing the difference between your shadows and your lights. So you always want to make sure you're happy with your lights, then come into your shadows. And then you just blend those shadows just until you're happy. So I'm going to go ahead and do this bow up here. Usually I would maybe consider not doing every shape at once, but what I'm going to do is just wipe my brush between the shapes so that they don't completely mush together. They're going to mush a little bit just because I'm trying to do this all at once. And I'm not too worried about it because this doesn't have to be super high detail. I think we're going to have a fair amount of detail as it is. This is just the nature of watercolor pencil. We're able to achieve more detail. So I'm going to just let it be fairly loose, but wash and dry my brush often so that I'm not over blending these shapes or getting my darks to completely blend into my light shapes, if that makes sense. Again, I generally like to start in my lights and then work into the darks. I try and just be mindful of where those two are as well, the lights versus darks, so that I can wash my brush if I've just gone into a really dark area. And down here it's really dark and shady, so I'm not quite as worried about maintaining my lights down there. And there you have our little bow. And to me, it looks like it's a little washed out. I could probably do with a bit more red, but there's two ways you can go about that. You can either add the red right now by pulling it right off your brush, or sorry, right off your pencil with your brush, kind of like this. And I have a couple reds. I might grab this one. It's a little more Christmassy red. And then you can just drop that bright red right back onto the areas that are wet. And it's almost like working with watercolor paint. It's just you have a lot of control. You can just add it just where you want it. And you're working fairly dry at this point. So this is a nice way that you can add a bit more red if you want to. Or the other option is to just wait and add it after everything is dry. You can come back on with your dry pencil onto your dry paper and add the details that way. I tend to do it this way just because it saves, I think, a bit of time. You don't have to wait for anything to dry. But there are times I do let it dry because I have enough detail I want to add that I will just wait. This doesn't tend to be as crisp for adding details. This just allows you to push the color further, but you can actually end up losing detail as you do that and everything's still wet. So just keep that in mind. If you ever need really crisp details, you probably will want to let everything dry, come back in with a dry pencil and dry paper and add extra details and then decide if you want to blend them again. I'm thinking I'm going to do the same thing I did on my other box and just push the shadow a little bit in this section right here. So I just wet that shape. And I'm just dropping a little bit, again, this is my watercolor paint. I'm just dropping a little bit of it in there just to create a little bit more shadow on this side of the box. And that's going to help give it the impression as well of it being 3D, right? Because we're keeping the shadow side more shaded than the light side. And this side you could add more shadow as I did over there. You just have to be really careful that the two shapes, like this and this shape, don't touch as you're doing this with your water, so that they don't blend together. Just be aware that if your water ends up flowing between the two shapes, you can lose your shadow. You can throw a bit of shadow though down in this corner. I think that adds to it. So I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. Now that this is dry, I'm going to come in and push my shadows a little bit more. I'm pushing this with just a tiny little bit of indigo blue because I feel like the shadows could be pushed a bit further. I don't even think I need to worry about blending it this time. I think I'm just going to leave that as it is. Before we move on to our next boxes, I just wanted to show you this one as inspiration if you want to try something like this on one of your boxes. You can see I've gone ahead and drawn the entire box first using our 2-point perspective, just like we've been doing. And then I draw the ribbons the same way with our vertical lines, and all the vertical stripes on this present also remain vertical. And then the stripes that go this way are just following the same parallel of the sides of the box. You can see that happening here and over here. And then the same thing is happening on the top. Each of these lines, again, is still running parallel with the sides of the box. And then at the very end, I used a little extra dark red and placed it in the intersections where those lines cross. If you'd like to go into more depth with perspective drawing, that's something I teach in my private lessons for students who are interested. I find that the students who don't necessarily consider themselves as creative really enjoy perspective drawing. However, I also offer lessons in watercolor painting, drawing, watercolor pencil, and colored pencil, and I tailor them to students' individual needs. If you're curious to learn more, you can leave a comment below, or you can reach me through my email newsletter. I look forward to hearing from you. All right, finally onto our group of 3 presents. We're going to be using watercolor pencil for the whole thing here, so let's go ahead and get started. I don't know why, but this little ball here is calling my name and I want to make it gold. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill it in, except I'm going to leave a little highlight. As you can see right there for my light. So I'm going to fill the rest of it in. And I always say make your highlight maybe bigger than you think you need it to be, because you can always shrink it. It's a lot harder to try and lift out. It's possible to lift, but it's just easier to just get it on there. And I'm going to add a little bit of this slightly deeper brown. So I filled that in with my golden ochre. So it's kind of a golden yellow color. Then I'm filling this in kind of like a crescent shape with my burnt sienna. And I'm going to leave just a smidgen of light like right there. And then I'm going to come in and put a little bit of brown, just a little bit of that on top of the burnt sienna. So I've kind of got a range of color going here on my gold ball. It's a lot of detail for a shiny little tiny ball like this, but hey, that was kind of fun and it was pretty easy. And I might even grab my black and just put a tiny bit of shadow onto the little top of this. I know it's laying on its side, but just to kind of make it look like an ornament. I'm going to do this one with stripes, and I'm going to use candy cane colors to make it nice and bright and festive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along here and do green stripes first. Just more or less try and kind of space them out. I'm not being super precise with the way that the perspective works here. I'm just kind of eyeballing. I'm going to stick with red on this one. I might do gold somewhere else, but for this one I think I'm just going to go with the red. So I'm just going to fill the ribbon in so that we don't lose it, because I feel like I'm going to get lost here. So we have a nice thick ribbon on the top. I'm going to come in here, and again, these need to run parallel, so trying to make sure I kind of more or less keep things parallel. Now this is kind of the edge one here. Let's just do, yeah, let's do it too. Something like that. All right, and then my box is kind of disappearing on me, so I'm just coming in here with a pencil just lightly to try and draw that back in there. I think this is about the edge of the top of my box. I don't even remember exactly where I had it. Then I'll come in with this brighter red here. Then I'm going to come in here with my purpley color, and I'm going to deepen the red on the left side of the box. Put a little bit more red on top. I have a couple of reds going. One's a little more of a Christmassy red, and the other one's a slight bit of an orange red, but I find that they work fairly nice together. They just make it a nice intense color, but you can really use whatever reds you have. And then I might put a tiny bit of this indigo on this edge of the box down here to kind of create a bit of a shadow. So I'm just going to do that very lightly. Whoops, I kind of came around to the front. Whoops. I'm just going to lighten that off a little bit because I don't want it to be too blended into the side here. So I'll just put a little bit less. I don't mind a little bit on the front, but I think I went a little too strong. Okay, this is still the side. I'll put a little bit more indigo there. Okay, so I'm definitely going to want the darkest brown under here. So I'm going to just go ahead right now and fill this in with my 2 browns. So I use some burnt sienna and then this darker color of brown. And then I'm going to do the brown, or the burnt sienna rather, kind of towards the left of each of these shapes. So a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit at the edge of the bow. Okay, here, I know that's not left. I just made it darker because it was kind of coming closer to the center of the bow, if that makes sense. So there's less light hitting in this area here. Put a little tiny bit at the edge. This is our light side, so we don't want as much brown there. You can put some coming out from underneath because, again, be a little shady under there, and then put some here. And we're going to make the shiniest part kind of around where it tips over the edge of the box like that, because it's going to be getting some light hitting it. So we'll do something like that. Put a little bit under here and maybe just a tiny bit. I don't want too much brown on that part of the ribbon. Do you enjoy working in watercolor pencil? If so, I think you'll be interested in my free 2-part pencil technique mini workshop. Whether you're looking for ways to add texture to your work, or if you simply enjoy coloring and would like to add dimension to your coloring pages, this workshop is for you. You can even apply many of these techniques to graphite pencil or other dry media. I'll share examples of how I apply these techniques to inspire you with ideas for your own artwork. You can sign up for this workshop at the link in the description below. Now back to today's video. And then I think I might just keep this box simple, fill it in with 2 greens, use 1 green for the shadows and 1 for the lighter spots. I'm just going to put the smallest amount of a deeper green for shadows because I think that that's actually kind of pretty just as it is, but this is optional. You don't need this extra green here for your shadows. I'm putting a little bit of shadow just kind of towards the bottom and towards the left. I might paint this one with this light blue, or I should say color it with this light blue. And when I want to add a few snowflakes, which is my hope for this one at the end, I'll have to do the snowflakes at the very end. So I'll do everything but the snowflakes. I'll make this very light blue, put more shadow again towards the left. And I might do the bow kind of a bluey color as well. So once again, I'm going to kind of do it the way that I did some of my bows earlier. I'm just going to come over everything. Just do these loops. Let's keep it simple. Let's not make it complicated. Let's not worry about fancy shadows or anything. Let's just get these on here. So my darker blue, this is my dark indigo, the one that I used over here. Just putting a little bit of it. But again, I'm not being super precise with my shadows or doing anything overly special. I'm just trying to get this side to have a little bit of something on it. I'm just going to go ahead and blend everything, and then I will come back and add a tiny bit of detail to that one. I'm going to start with my highlight here, and I'm just going to moisten it and then just kind of in a slightly jittery motion kind of work my way away from that highlight. You can see how that ball is just coming to life when I blend that. I'm going to just go ahead and do this little piece here too. Keep my paper towel, dab it off. I'm going to work my way down the side of this box so that I get the shadows. Wash my brush, dry my brush, and do it again. Ooh, I'm blending out my reds a little bit into my purple. Which is one reason you may like the idea of doing all your shadows the way we're going to do on the first box, where we did all of our shadow color first and then come in afterwards and do your fine details, because occasionally you can end up lifting colors you don't want to. So I'm trying to just stay in the white area for now. And sometimes I am dragging a little bit of my color around, which I'm going to try and move around and come back to this after. So let's just leave it like this for now. I'm going to come over here and do my gold bow. So lightest areas first, and then I'm going to work into my darker areas. Do that on the top of the bow here. And I'll be washing my brush again. Every time I want to go into a lighter area, I'm going to have to wash the darkness off of it. Then I'm going to come into this little box that we are going to do with our light soft blue and just get our whites on there first, right? Or I should say just our water on there first. Then come into our dark sections. And you can see we've created shadow just using that nice light blue. Come in here, blend this around, come and do our dark side. You could leave a little white gap or do it after. I think I'm okay with a little bit of blending between the shapes, just a smidgen. Okay, I think I'm gonna let this dry for a quick second so that I don't dip my hand into that nice bright blue paint and drag it around. Then when this is dry, I'll come and finish my last bits of these shapes here. This is dried enough that I can come in now and do my green. So I'm gonna do my green stripes, and you can right away see how much more intense they become once they've been blended with water. Then I'll come in here and blend my greens with, of course, starting in my lights, working into my darks. And you can really see how that watercolor pencil, once it's blended, really comes to life. Now that this is dry, I'm going to come in and just do some really simple little snowflakes. I'll see if I have room to add any extra detail to them after, but for now, I'm just going to do these just like this. And I'll just blend them out just gently with some water. And yes, I'm losing definition in mine. If you want yours to have a little bit more structure, just leave it drier. I might even go ahead and add a few little dots with my brush since I've got all this pigment on here from having gone over these snowflakes. I've got some of that snowflake color on my brush, so I'm just going to use that color and just do a few little like snowflake dots. In fact, we could even grab our paint or our watercolor pencil and just add some extra pigment to our brush and do that as well. I kind of like that look of these little dots. I think it adds something to it. So I'm just going to do that in a few more places, and then I will call this one done. Actually, why don't we do a little bit of shadow just under the presents quick? I'll do this one in watercolor pencil. Some of them I'm going to do this with watercolor paint. I think it might even be faster, but let's just go ahead and just take our indigo blue, our dark indigo, just add a little bit of shadow, especially towards the left side of each present under here. Not wanting to do anything too fancy. And then I'm just going to grab my paintbrush with a little bit of water and just very gently blend it. And I'm not going to worry about having some hard edges underneath my shadows for now. Sometimes I really blend these out and soften them, but for today I'm just going to do this. I think that's good. If you find some of them are too washed out, you can always just go in here with a little bit more of your watercolor pencil. And then I guess I still need to finish this ribbon here, so I'll just quickly cover it. If you do enjoy working in watercolor pencil, you might want to check out my watercolor pencil playlist, where you can find more beginner-friendly tutorials. In the meantime, I hope today's lesson has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, that it's enhancing your Christmas celebration, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. Have a Merry Christmas. Bye.